When a person plants poison, they shouldn't be shocked when their own hands start shaking. Let that sit with you, my dear chosen ones, because the truth you're about to hear isn't soft, it isn't sweet, and it isn't meant to soothe your enemies. It's meant to expose them. It's meant to remind you of the power you carry simply by existing, by being who you are in a world that thought it could break you quietly. Chosen ones, listen closely. In a society obsessed with filters, facades, and borrowed personalities, people think they can craft a version of themselves that hides the rot underneath. But consequences don't take orders from appearances. Reality has a funny way of peeling back any mask, and when it does, it doesn't tap politely. It barges in like a truth with perfect aim. That's why your enemies can fool crowds, but they can't fool the law of return. There is no costume convincing enough to outsmart the ripple effect of their own actions. You might wonder, why does it take so long? Why does it look like they're getting away with it? Oh, chosen ones, don't be mistaken. Silence is not approval, it's accumulation. It's the universe tightening the thread. It's the storm gathering data. Their wrongdoings aren't forgotten. They're recorded, like a tab they didn't think they'd ever have to pay. But the bill always arrives. Always. And when it does, the symptoms they experience won't be random. They'll be reflections, mirror images of the damage they tried to inflict on you. You see, the human body already reacts to guilt. People who lie, manipulate, or betray often suffer in ways they don't even recognize as self-made. Sleepless nights disguised as stress, sudden anxiety disguised as pressure, mysterious illnesses disguised as bad luck. But chosen ones, imagine those consequences intensified, amplified by the weight of every action they buried. Imagine their mind racing as fast as the lies they once told. Imagine their peace collapsing in the same shape they tried to collapse yours. That's not coincidence. That's what happens when the energy they projected circles back like a boomerang they forgot they threw. And here's where the power of being chosen becomes crystal clear. You don't lift a finger, you don't plot revenge, you don't throw stones, you simply stand. You stay aligned, stay grounded, stay true to who you are. Because your very existence, your healing, your growth, your silence, it all becomes a mirror that reflects everything they hoped to escape. Their downfall starts looking eerily familiar because it's shaped by their own choices. Their symptoms match their sins, not metaphorically, but mechanically. So when you ask yourself, why am I still standing while they're starting to unravel? The answer is simple. You were built to withstand what they tried to weaponize. You were chosen not because you're untouchable, but because you're unshakable. Your endurance is a declaration. Your resilience is evidence. Their collapse is not your job. It's their reflection. The truth, my chosen ones, is that there is no remedy for a judgment they created themselves. No quick apology, no sudden guilt, no dramatic performance can erase a pattern they refuse to break. Once the consequences lock in, there is no antidote. There is only exposure. And their life starts reading like a story they wrote, but never intended to star in. Your enemies may have started a war, but all they really did was activate a boomerang with perfect aim. And while they scramble to understand why everything is falling apart, you rise, not to gloat, not to punish, but to exist in the clarity that every action eventually returns home. So let the quote echo again. When a person plants poison, they shouldn't be shocked when their own hands start shaking. Chosen ones, stay steady. Their symptoms will always match their sins, and no remedy will exist for the judgment they wrote in their own handwriting. Before we go any deeper, chosen ones, let me speak directly to you for a moment. Your presence here isn't accidental, it's alignment. If this message is already stirring something in you, if you feel that subtle pull in your chest, that quiet confirmation that you've witnessed these patterns unfold in real time, then you already know you're not watching by chance. You're watching because you were meant to understand what others can't even see. So if you're ready to step fully into that awareness, to claim the strength that comes with being the one they couldn't break, tap that like button, hit subscribe, and drop the number 88 in the comments to show you're done carrying what was never yours to hold. And if you want to go the extra mile, support with a super thanks. It helps this message reach more chosen ones waking up to their truth. Now, take a breath, chosen one, because we're about to walk step by step into a reality most people will never comprehend. And trust me, if you are truly chosen, what you're about to hear will feel less like information and more like recognition. You'll see the signs you've lived through, the patterns you've sensed, the consequences you've watched unfold around those who targeted you. Their symptoms, their unraveling, their collapse. It all begins to make sense once you understand the law behind it. Only chosen ones notice these connections. Ordinary minds simply aren't wired to see what echoes beneath the surface. So, let's get into it. Number 1. The blow they unleashed becomes the scar they can't hide. When someone throws a dagger soaked in malice, they shouldn't be surprised when it's their own hands that start bleeding first. My dear chosen ones, hear this clearly. The world has a way of returning energy with surgical precision. Not mystical, not religious, just the raw mechanics of consequence. And the people who set out to harm you? They always forget one thing. Every strike they make becomes the blueprint of their own unraveling. The wound they tried to carve into your life becomes the exact shape of the crack that splits theirs wide open. You might ask yourself, why does it mirror so perfectly? Why does their downfall look like a reenactment of what they tried to do to me? Because chosen ones, those who target people with rare resilience, deep awareness and quiet power, never realize they're handing out weapons that boomerang. They believe they're immune. They believe their charm, influence or manipulation will shield them. They think they're the puppeteers, while everyone else dances on strings. But strings snap, and when they do, it's always the puppet master who falls the hardest. Chosen ones, think back for a moment. If someone tried to smear your name, didn't you eventually watch rumors turn on them like wolves recognizing their handler is actually prey? If someone tried to isolate you, didn't you later see their connections rot from the inside out until even their own circle started questioning their motives? If someone tried to break your confidence, didn't their own identity eventually start cracking under the weight of the lies they built to hold themselves together? These aren't coincidences. These aren't karma moments people romanticize. This is cause and effect in its purest form, consequence dressed in the same costume their actions wore. And yes, chosen ones, sometimes it takes time. Sometimes your enemies walk around with smug confidence, laughing like the world is their playground. They might appear untouchable, undefeated, unbothered. But don't be fooled. Life is not ignoring what they did. Life is recording it, observing, storing every detail of their intent and impact like data waiting to be processed. And when the timing aligns, the return doesn't just land, it lands with uncanny accuracy. You won't need to explain it when it happens. You won't need to point fingers. People will look at their downfall and instinctively understand. They'll see the symmetry. They'll recognize the pattern. And your enemies will have no choice but to whisper the truth to themselves. This looks a lot like what I did. There is no remedy for that kind of realization because it's not punishment, it's exposure. It's the echo of their actions looping back in surround sound. Chosen ones, understand your power here. You don't have to retaliate. You don't have to prove anything. You don't even have to raise your voice. The weight of their own choices is heavy enough. The blade they sharpened with pride always turns, slowly, deliberately, and unmistakably, pointing right back at them. And once it turns, there is no antidote. They won't just lose, they'll lose in a way that forces them to confront the reflection they spent years avoiding. This is justice in high definition. And you, chosen ones, are simply the witness, untouched, unbothered, and rising above the ruins they created for themselves. Number 2. Consequences don't stall, they gather strength in the dark. Consequences aren't late, they're loading. The silence before a collapse isn't peace, it's pressure building where no one can see. My dear chosen ones, let me tell you something many people never learn. What feels like a delay is often the moment life is sharpening its aim. When someone harms you, manipulates you, sabotages you, or tries to twist your story against you, the first instinct is to look around and think, why isn't anything happening to them? Why does it seem like they're getting away with it? But chosen ones, you must understand, there is a difference between nothing happening and everything preparing. Judgment, true, neutral, universal judgment, doesn't rush. It doesn't operate on impulse or emotion. It observes, it gathers, it studies pattern, intention, repetition. It waits, not because it's hesitant, but because precision requires time. Consequences don't fly blindly, they calculate. And those who wrong you, they mistake quiet for escape. They mistake the absence of immediate fallout for immunity. But chosen ones, nothing could be further from the truth. Think of fruit on a tree. It doesn't fall the moment it forms. It grows, it swells, it matures, until eventually its own weight becomes the force that pulls it down. That's how the consequences of your enemies work. They ripen, they gather mass, they build pressure, and the longer the wait, the heavier the drop. You see, when people hurt a chosen one, they often repeat the offense, over and over. They become bolder, louder, sloppier. They think they've outsmarted life itself. They mistake your silence for defeat rather than discipline. They interpret the lack of immediate fallout as approval rather than accumulation. But chosen ones, the truth is simple. The fall hits hardest when pride is at its peak. Why does the universe wait? Because exposure requires timing, because clarity requires context, because collapse needs witnesses. Quick consequences might soothe your emotions, but they wouldn't reveal the truth. They wouldn't show the full pattern of who your enemies chose to be. They wouldn't teach the lesson life wants everyone, yes, everyone watching, to understand. The setup always looks like silence. It always feels unfair. It always tests your patience. But chosen ones, while you're wondering where the justice is, the consequences are growing sharper. They are shaping themselves to fit the exact shape of the offense. Not random, not vague, customized, personal, tailored. If your enemy trusted their voice, that voice will crack first. If they trusted their image, that image will crumble. If they trusted their influence, that influence will turn against them. If they trusted their relationships, those ties will snap exactly where they tied their lies. This isn't revenge. This is reflection in motion. So when you look around and it seems like nothing is happening, understand, you're not waiting for the consequences. You're witnessing their construction. The fall is not delayed. It's being engineered for maximum clarity. It's aligning with the perfect moment where even they will have no room to deny the truth. Chosen ones, remember this, silence is not a lack of justice, it's justice marinating, and when it finally arrives, it never misses. It shows up right on time, fully weighted and unmistakably accurate. Number 3. What they send out doesn't return changed, it returns cloned. Retribution doesn't knock, it copies and pastes. When someone spits venom, they shouldn't be surprised when their own breath starts to taste like poison. Chosen ones, let me break this down in the clearest, sharpest way possible. What people put into the world doesn't return as a metaphor. It returns as a replica. Not a watered-down version, not a symbolic lesson, but a carbon copy of the very chaos they tried to unleash on you. And the wildest part? When the echo comes back, it feels so familiar to them that they can't even pretend it's coincidence. Life simply presses replay, and suddenly they are living inside the script they wrote for you. People like to imagine that consequences are vague, unpredictable, or poetic. They think the energy they project might come back someday, somewhere. In some abstract way they'll never connect to their behavior. But chosen ones, you know the truth is far more direct and far more brutal. The return doesn't just teach a lesson. It exposes the blueprint of their intentions with such precision that anyone watching can trace the fallout step by step back to its architect. Think about it. When they gossiped to tear down your name, what happened later? Didn't they find themselves drowning in whispers they couldn't control? When they betrayed you, didn't betrayal eventually crawl into their own circle, delivered not by strangers, but by the very people they trusted the most? When they manipulated situations to corner you, didn't they eventually get trapped in their own web, realizing too late that the strings they pulled were actually wrapped around their own throat? Chosen ones, this isn't magic, this isn't mysticism, this is consequence in its purest form, mirrored, measured, and mercilessly accurate. And here's what really shakes them. They can't escape the resemblance. They can't pretend it's unrelated. The universe doesn't return harm in poetic riddles. It returns it like a photocopy. Everyone watching can see the pattern. People start whispering, "Isn't that exactly what they did to so-and-so?" And that, chosen ones, is where the sting pierces deepest, the undeniable recognition that they're facing themselves. By the time their replicated consequences land, it's never early enough for them to prevent it, and always too late for them to undo it. They can try to apologize, shift blame, rewrite history, or perform remorse, but once the energy circles back, it's already signed, sealed, and delivered. They must live through the very pain they insisted would never touch them. They must feel the weight they placed on you, multiplied, magnified, and delivered without dilution. And chosen ones, you don't have to lift a finger. That's the beauty of it. This isn't revenge, it's reflection. It's life handing them a mirror they can't look away from. The same lines they tried to narrate over your story are now being read aloud in theirs, word for word, chapter for chapter. They authored the chaos. Now they're living the sequel. Retribution doesn't improvise. It replicates. And for those who tried to break a chosen one, the playback hits harder than the original script ever did. Number 4. The blade they forged for others becomes the one that turns inward. The blade they crafted for others becomes the cut they can't outrun. My dear chosen ones, remember this. Whoever sharpens a weapon of harm eventually slices their own shadow first. There's a dangerous arrogance that some people carry, a swagger that comes from thinking they can wound others without ever paying the price. Your enemies, the ones who smiled while slicing, who pretended innocence while plotting chaos, they all shared the same delusion, that harm only travels in one direction. They believed they could shape a blade from manipulation, sharpen it with deceit, polish it with ego, and somehow walk away untouched. But blades don't respect intentions. Blades don't develop loyalty. Blades don't take sides. A weapon forged in malice becomes a boomerang with teeth, deadly, precise, and always returning to its maker. Chosen ones, listen closely. Those who tried to damage your peace never realized how much residue their own actions left behind. Every lie they spoke collected weight. Every rumor they spread sharpened an edge. Every trap they set added another notch to the handle. By the time they felt powerful, the weapon they held wasn't aimed outward anymore. It was aimed inward. Not because you fought back, not because you lifted a hand, but because consequences cling to the tools used to create them. Your enemies often think their charm is enough to escape reality. They think intellect can hide malicious intent. They believe connections can shield them from exposure. But the world doesn't respond to reputations. It responds to patterns. And a pattern built on harm eventually folds in on itself. The same voice they used to manipulate begins revealing their secrets. The same influence they used as a shield becomes the spotlight that exposes them. The same circle they once dominated slowly tightens until they realize they're standing alone, bleeding from a blade they never stopped swinging. When chosen ones ask, why do they fall so dramatically? Why does their collapse look so familiar? The answer is simple. Because the method was always the message. The world returns what people invest, but it doesn't return it quietly. It returns it with clarity, with precision, with the exact sharpness they once used on you. What made them feel invincible becomes the reason they crumble. Their slick tongue becomes a slip-up. Their calculated moves become obvious desperation. Their behind-the-scenes control becomes a public unraveling. And the most brutal part? They do it to themselves. No enemy needed, no revenge required, just the recoil of their own intent. Chosen ones, there is no immunity from the consequences of malice. No one escapes the moment when the blade turns. And when it does, it doesn't graze. It cuts deep, slow, undeniable, and eerily familiar. They fall by the same strategy they once celebrated. They bleed from the same edge they aimed at you, and there is no remedy for a downfall handcrafted by their own hand. This is not punishment. This is symmetry. This is the echo of their choices returning home, and you, chosen ones, stand untouched, not because you were never targeted, but because their weapon was never designed to survive its wielder. Number 5. The battle they start becomes the trap they built with their own hands. When you're chosen, their attack becomes the cage they build around themselves. Some people dig a grave for you and fall in first because they never learned the difference between strategy and self-sabotage. My dear chosen ones, listen closely. There's a brutal kind of poetry in watching someone start a war they were never equipped to win, especially when that war wasn't even real. The moment your enemies set their sights on you, convinced they could break you, expose you, or outmaneuver you, they made their first mistake. Not because you fought back, not because you retaliated, but because you didn't need to. The trap wasn't something you set, it was something they carried within them all along. Chosen ones, understand the power of this truth. When certain people decide to come after you, the battle they think they're initiating is nothing more than their ego dragging them into a maze with no exit. They believe they're launching a brilliantly calculated strike, but really, they're stepping into a battlefield made of their own insecurities, their own fears, their own unhealed wounds. You don't have to lift a finger, they're already tangled in the weapons they created. They become obsessed with you, they study you, they stalk your every move. They convince themselves they must tear you down to feel taller, but each attempt exposes them more than it harms you. Their voice gets louder, their behavior more erratic, their intentions more transparent. And the irony, you're not even responding, you're not fighting, you're not entertaining their chaos, yet somehow they're spiraling as if you're the one pressing every button in their mind. Chosen ones, this is where the beauty of your silence shines. Your stillness becomes the mirror they can't escape. Your lack of retaliation forces their true character to leak out in front of everyone. They think they're revealing you, but all they reveal is the darkness they've been hiding. They think they're exposing your flaws, but instead they expose their obsession. They think they're in control, yet every move they make tightens the rope around their own ego. While they're busy plotting, you're busy growing. While they're feeding their paranoia, you're feeding your purpose. And that contrast alone burns them from the inside out. Because how can someone win a war when the opponent isn't even on the battlefield? They punch at shadows, wrestle with illusions, chase ghosts they created in their own mind. And the more they chase, the more exhausted they become. Here's what your enemies never understand. Chosen ones don't win by force. They win by existing. Your stability highlights their instability. Your calm highlights their chaos. Your progress highlights their stagnation. And before they realize what's happening, they're fighting a version of themselves they can't escape. Their downfall doesn't come from your retaliation. It comes from their obsession with trying to bring you down. They mistake noise for power, aggression for strength, manipulation for strategy. But all they're really doing is stacking bricks for their own collapse. So stand firm, chosen ones. Let them exhaust themselves in battles you never agreed to fight. Let them dig deeper into wars they created from jealousy, insecurity, and delusion. Because in the end, they don't lose to you. They lose to the reflection they refuse to confront. Number 6. Accountability isn't an illness. It's the autopsy of every hidden choice. Judgment has no cure because it's not a disease, it's an autopsy. When the truth finally catches up, it doesn't ask how you feel, it shows you who you've been. My dear chosen ones, this is where the illusion ends. People like to imagine that consequences are negotiable, that accountability can be paused, postponed, prayed away, or softened with a dramatic apology thrown into the air at the last minute. They behave as if damage disappears once they suddenly feel bad about causing it. But judgment, real judgment, the kind that mirrors intent and exposes truth, isn't a fever to be treated. It's a final report. It doesn't arrive to heal, it arrives to reveal. Your enemies always think they'll get ahead of the fallout. They believe that if they cry a little louder, confess a little softer, or decorate their remorse with enough emotional glitter, the universe will hand them a reset button. They forget that apologies don't erase patterns, regret doesn't rewrite history, and performance doesn't overwrite intent. Chosen ones, hear this clearly. Judgment isn't concerned with how sorry someone looks. It concerns itself only with what's real. And when the moment of exposure arrives, it's not prescribing medicine, it's conducting an autopsy, not on the body, but on the character, on the decisions, on the motives they hid behind smiles and pretty words. By the time the consequences surface, the decay has already been happening for years. The only difference now is that it becomes visible. Your enemies won't just face what they did, they'll face who they became while doing it. Imagine this. Someone builds their entire world on half-truths, manipulation, and the belief that they can outsmart reality. To them, life is a stage, and everyone else is an audience meant to applaud their performance. But judgment doesn't play along. When it arrives, the curtains don't close. They get ripped open. The spotlight doesn't dim. It intensifies. Every hidden motive, every quiet betrayal, every choice they hoped would dissolve into silence suddenly becomes evidence laid out on the table for all to witness. And this is the part that unsettles them the most. Everyone else sees it too. There's no private recovery arc, no secret redemption storyline they can script for themselves. Consequences don't arrive backstage, they arrive in full view, because the entire point isn't punishment, it's clarity. It's truth taking its final stand. When someone moves through life like accountability is optional, truth doesn't negotiate. It autopsies the lie they lived inside and publishes the findings in high definition. Chosen ones, this is why no remedy exists for this kind of judgment. You can't medicate a pattern. You can't bandage a habit. You can't cure a lifestyle built on harm with a single moment of vulnerability. By the time the consequences catch up, the damage isn't new, it's simply undeniable. And this is where your power shines through. You don't have to expose them. You don't have to retaliate. You don't have to speak a single word. Life will do the dissection. Life will turn every light on. Life will ensure the truth they buried becomes the very thing that buries their illusions. Judgment has no cure because it wasn't designed to heal. It was designed to reveal. And my dear chosen ones, that revelation is the very thing that frees you while it exposes them. Number 7. When remorse is absent, exposure becomes the only currency left. When denial becomes their shield, exposure becomes their price. Those who bury their wrongdoings always forget one thing. The deeper they dig, the louder the ground will crack when it finally gives way beneath them. My dear chosen ones, listen closely, because this truth is razor-sharp and aimed straight at the ones who thought they could rewrite reality. The people who harmed you and walked away without remorse didn't escape anything. They just postponed the moment the curtain would fall. They didn't dodge consequences. They merely delayed the explosion. Every lie they told, every manipulation they crafted, every scheme they orchestrated, all of it was logged, stored, and layered like a debt they thought no one would ever call due. And chosen ones, exposure is the currency life accepts when someone refuses to pay what they owe. What your enemies never understood is that silence isn't permission, it's patience. Life gives people chances, not to escape accountability, but to choose it willingly. But when someone keeps stacking harm with no intention of acknowledging it, when they camouflage themselves behind polished personas and fabricated innocence, they force nature itself to balance the scales publicly. Because when responsibility is denied long enough, revelation becomes mandatory. Chosen ones, the unrepentant don't simply make mistakes. They manufacture patterns. They become experts in disguise. They tell themselves stories in the mirror to avoid facing their truth. They twist narratives so skillfully they almost believe their own performance. But here's the part they never see coming. The human conscience may be ignored, but consequence never is. And when exposure hits, it doesn't do it gently. It arrives like a dam bursting, sudden, loud, undeniable. Their secrets won't slip out quietly. They'll erupt. The lies they stacked like bricks will collapse into a rubble they have to crawl through. The reputation they polished for years will shatter faster than they can gather the pieces. And chosen ones, it won't happen because anyone sought revenge. It will happen because exposure is simply the last stage of truth breaking free after being suffocated for too long. And here's the part that cuts the deepest for them. Exposure echoes. Once the truth surfaces, it doesn't just appear and disappear. It circulates. People talk. Stories travel. Their past becomes a shadow that trails them into every room, every relationship, every new start they attempt to create. Not because the world is cruel, but because they chose to build their life on foundations they never intended to reinforce with honesty. Chosen ones, this is why their symptoms will match their sins. When someone refuses to correct themselves privately, they guarantee their collapse will happen publicly. Every attempt to outrun the truth only intensifies its pursuit. They turn into their own cautionary tale. Not because anyone wished them harm, but because exposure is the only consequence left when denial exhausts all other options. They thought their crafted image would protect them. They thought silence and manipulation would save them. But truth doesn't need their permission. It only needs its moment. And when that moment arrives, it pays them back in full, loudly, widely, and with no remedy in sight. Chosen ones, stand tall. Their unraveling isn't your concern. It's their invoice. Their exposure isn't your doing. It's their reflection. And the price they're paying now is nothing more than the cost of refusing to face themselves when they had the chance. Number 8. Every action plants a seed, and some seeds grow into the ropes that bind. Every hidden act is a seed, and some seeds grow into the ropes that tighten around their own ambitions. A buried secret isn't dead, it's a root waiting for the right season to rise and wrap around its maker. Chosen ones, pay close attention here, because this truth is one of the hardest hitting you'll ever hear. People love to believe that what they do in silence stays in silence. They cling to the illusion that if no one witnessed it, it evaporates. But actions don't vanish, they germinate. Every lie your enemies told, every manipulation they orchestrated, every betrayal they executed when they thought you weren't looking. Those weren't moments, they were seeds, and seeds don't disappear simply because the planter walked away. They grow, they mature, they wait. And here's the part your enemies never accounted for. The soil they buried their wrongdoing in wasn't protection, it was exposure waiting to happen. Silence isn't a grave. Silence is soil and arrogance. That's water. It nourishes every dark intention they thought they successfully concealed. While they strutted confidently, believing they had buried their filth deep enough that it would never surface, the roots were spreading beneath them. Quiet, patient, deliberate. Chosen ones, what's planted in secret doesn't grow in secret. That's the twist. The tree always rises in public. It grows where everyone can see it. It grows where it can't be ignored. The very actions they hid behind closed doors become a towering display they can't explain, deny, or outrun. Their own patterns expose them. Their own choices betray them. Their own seeds become their downfall. They thought they planted control. They thought they planted power. They thought they planted leverage over you. But what they truly planted was the architecture of their own collapse. Seeds don't stay small, they don't stay harmless, they evolve, they expand, they take shape in ways that reveal everything the planter hoped would stay hidden. And by the time the tree stands tall, it's too late to uproot it. Too many roots, too much history, too much evidence. Chosen one, the chilling truth is this: the higher the tree grows, the harder they fall from it. They didn't plant inconvenience, they planted exposure. They didn't plant a moment, they planted a future where every root tells the story they tried to hide. And when the tree becomes too big to ignore, it doesn't just expose them, it holds them, locks them in, becomes the rope that tightens around their reputation, their credibility, their peace. They won't fall because someone pushed them. You didn't have to do anything. There's no revenge needed here. They fall because what they nurtured in darkness finally demanded a price. Seeds are quiet going into the ground, but catastrophic coming out. And when the tree they planted rises high enough, it becomes the stage, no, the spotlight, under which their judgment unfolds. Chosen ones, remember this: every action has a harvest. And your enemies? They planted theirs with their own hands. Number 9, you can't escape the debt you stacked. Avoidance only increases the interest. You can't outrun the tab you kept pretending didn't exist. My dear chosen ones, lean in for this one, because it cuts deep and clean. There's a brutal truth the world tries hard to forget. No one escapes the debt they willingly create. And your enemies, the ones who thought they could inflict damage without consequence, are about to learn that the hard way. A person who spends years planting landmines should never act shocked when their own steps start trembling. Let that truth sting exactly where it needs to. Chosen ones, your enemies operated under a dangerous illusion. They thought consequences were optional, that accountability was negotiable, that as long as they said the right words at the right time, their wrongdoings would disappear like smoke. They believed that a sudden burst of remorse, real or rehearsed, could erase the patterns they spent years perfecting. But life doesn't work like an emotional erase button. It works like a ledger, recording everything with unnerving precision. And that's where this hits them the hardest. Apologies don't cancel patterns. Emotional pleas don't erase damage. A tearful confession doesn't wipe clean a history of intentional harm. My dear chosen ones, you know this. You lived through it. You saw how quick they were to ruin your peace, but how slow they were to take responsibility. You watched them treat pain like a toy and accountability like an insult. So now, as their consequences surface, you may wonder, why are they crumbling now? Why does everything seem to be falling apart for them at once? Because they built their lives on overdue payments. Every rumor they spread, every betrayal they committed, every manipulation they executed, those were charges added to their spiritual balance sheet, and they never intended to pay any of it. But a debt ignored is still a debt, and the longer it sits unpaid, the more interest it collects. Chosen ones, understand this. Your enemies didn't just harm others, they harmed themselves. Each act of deceit, each calculated strike, was an investment in their own downfall disguised as power. They thought their charm could cover it. They thought their excuses could delay it. They thought their performance of regret could wipe it away. But regret without change is just theatre. And life doesn't forgive performers. It exposes them. Now the consequences they avoided are returning, not gently, not softly, but with the exact weight of everything they refused to fix. And here's what really shakes them. No remedy exists once the debt reaches its due date. Not an apology, not a plea, not a sudden desire to be better, because improvement was never their intention. Avoidance was. Chosen ones, their downfall is not cruelty, it's clarity. It's the realization that you cannot mistreat others and expect your own path to remain smooth. It's the echo of every choice they buried. It's the undeniable truth that you cannot outrun the mess you made while pretending your hands were clean. They didn't just avoid paying the debt, they deepened it. And now they are face to face with the bill they wrote themselves. You, chosen ones, don't need to lift a finger. Just watch. Their symptoms will match their sins, and no remedy will exist for a judgment they crafted with their own hands. Number 10. Strength isn't immunity. It's endurance that refuses to break. Chosen ones aren't untouchable. Your endurance exists for a reason. They didn't fail to break you because they were weak. They failed because you were built for storms they didn't know you could survive. My dear chosen ones, listen carefully. People often look at your survival and make the mistake of assuming it came easy. They glance at your strength, your composure, your refusal to crumble, and they label it luck, arrogance, or emotional detachment. But chosen ones, nothing about your journey has been accidental. You weren't protected because life never swung at you. You were protected because every blow you endured was meant to reveal something bigger than the pain itself. Being chosen has nothing to do with being bulletproof. It's not about walking through life untouched. It's about being positioned, placed in the exact places, storms and conflicts that would expose the intentions of those who came against you. You weren't preserved because harm didn't reach you. You were preserved through the harm because your endurance had a purpose. You were meant to outlast what was sent to break you, not just for yourself, but so that the truth behind every attack could rise to the surface for everyone to see. Your enemies never understood this. When they targeted you, they thought they were going after an ordinary person. They thought your quietness meant smallness, your kindness meant vulnerability, your silence meant approval. They mistook your restraint for weakness. They never realized they were testing someone who was positioned, not unprotected. They never realized that every scheme, every lie, every manipulation was constructing the very stage where their own exposure would eventually play out. Chosen ones, you were never preserved to prove you're invincible. You were preserved so the consequences of their actions would have a witness. If you had fallen, there would be nothing to reveal. If you had broken beyond repair, their narrative would have become the truth. But your survival? Oh, that changed everything. Your resilience became the undeniable evidence that the energy they sent out never landed the way they expected. Not because their intentions weren't harmful, but because you weren't the one destined to break. You became the mirror they never wanted to look into. Your ability to stand, to rebuild, to rise. Those were not coincidences, they were receipts, proof that what was meant to destroy you only highlighted who was truly out of alignment. Your endurance exposed the imbalance in the story. Your calm revealed their chaos. Your stability revealed their instability. And chosen ones, that's why you were protected, not for comfort, but for clarity. You were preserved so the truth could unfurl without distortion. You were protected so the consequences they triggered would unfold without confusion. You were positioned so that when their own actions came back to confront them, no one could question why the collapse looked so familiar. So no, you are not untouchable. You were never meant to be. You were meant to withstand, to witness, to reveal. You were meant to stand through the storm so when the dust finally settles, everyone sees not only who you truly are, but who they truly were. Their judgment becomes the lesson they refuse to learn any other way. Number 11. Collapse isn't humiliation. It's truth dismantling illusion piece by piece. Collapse doesn't embarrass them. It exposes the empire they built on denial. When someone builds their throne out of lies, they shouldn't be shocked when the first crack begins underneath their own feet. My dear chosen ones, let's pull the curtain back on a truth most people are too afraid to acknowledge. Collapse is not humiliation, it is revelation. When those who targeted you begin to fall apart piece by piece, it's not about theatrics, revenge, or some dramatic spectacle meant for your applause. Their downfall isn't designed to entertain you, it's designed to wake them up. Life doesn't humiliate people. It simply removes every illusion they used as armor until they're forced to confront the raw, unfiltered truth of who they've actually been. Chosen ones understand this deeply. People who move with malice often walk around convinced they're untouchable. They believe their charm, influence, or manipulation makes them immune to consequence. They mistake temporary success for permanent power. They think they can rewrite reality, twist narratives, silence voices, and walk away spotless. But collapse comes with a purpose, a precision, a brutal clarity that no mask can withstand. And when it comes, it doesn't swing wildly. It dismantles strategically. It goes after the structures they relied on the most, the relationships they exploited, the status they flaunted, the control they worshipped. These things begin slipping away, not to shame them publicly, but to shatter the delusion that they were ever above accountability. The fall doesn't just strip their outer world, it forces them inward, into the quiet they've avoided for years. And in that quiet, chosen ones, their true reflection finally emerges. The manipulator, the liar, the betrayer, the architect of their own chaos. They finally have to see themselves without filters, excuses, or an audience to applaud the performance. That's what collapse is. A mirror powerful enough to expose every hidden crack they pretended didn't exist. And no, it doesn't happen instantly. Collapse is patient. It unfolds like a slow-motion replay of every choice they thought didn't count. Their reputation crumbles, not because someone attacked them, but because truth refuses to stay buried. Their relationships deteriorate because the patterns they once hid now stand in full view. Their image dissolves because it was never built on anything real. Piece by piece, illusion detaches from reality until there's nowhere left to run. Chosen ones, this is not cruelty. This is balance. This is the weight of their own actions catching up, not to break them beyond repair, but to break the fantasy that shielded them from growth. Collapse is the moment ego meets silence. It's the moment arrogance hits the wall of reality. It's the moment a person realizes they were never in control, only postponing the consequences they created. You're not meant to laugh at their downfall. You're not meant to celebrate it like a spectacle. Their collapse is not about your satisfaction, it's about their recognition. Because for some people, the only way they will ever see the truth is by watching everything built on lies fall apart in front of them. Chosen ones, don't mistake their unraveling for humiliation. It is exposure, it is correction, it is life finally telling them this is who you became when you thought no one was watching. And the most poetic part? There's no remedy for that kind of clarity. Only acceptance, only evolution, if they dare to face themselves. And as we bring this message to a close, chosen ones, let this truth settle in your spirit. The symptoms your enemies face are not coincidences. They are reflections of every hidden move they made. Their collapse is not your concern, your rise is. Hold your power, hold your peace, and keep walking with the clarity that nothing formed against you can outlive the truth. If this resonated with you, hit that like button, subscribe for more, share this with another chosen one, and drop 77 in the comments to claim your alignment and your awakening.